Good morning.
Hello everyone.
I'm busy reading through Exodus, the book Exodus in the Bible. And I love reading the text and then also reading books on Exodus and what people are saying. It's this conversation constantly taking place. God speaking to me through the text, but I'm also in conversation with other readers of this text. I love it when it's this to and fro and getting to new understanding, and not only on a rational way, but almost on different experiences while busy with that. And a passage that has drawn my attention, and I mean, it's so well known, but that I really had to look at from different angles, is this passage in Exodus 3. Moses has fled from Egypt and he arrived in Midian, and there he married a daughter of one of the priests there in Midian, and Moses has settled down and he's tending his father-in-law's flocks. So his life is quite settled. He thinks, all right, I can retire here. This is looking good. So one day, while doing his normal daily work, we read here in Exodus 3 from verse 1. One day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moses, Moses. Here I am, Moses replied. And then God says, take off your shoes, because you are entering this space here in the middle of nowhere. That's actually a very, very special place. And God says to Moses, I've heard the pleas of the Israelites in Egypt, and I want to do something about it, and I'm going to send you to them. He says here in verse 7, yes, I'm aware of their suffering, so I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. And then in verse 10, now go, for I am sending you to the Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt. But Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? And then God says, I'll be with you. Don't worry about that. But Moses isn't finished with all his objections. He says in verse 13, if I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of our ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is his name? Then what should I tell them? God replied to Moses, I am who I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. It is such an interesting text. And what is interesting, reading up on what other people have written on it, I mean, there are so many views on what is happening exactly here. And what is God actually saying to Moses? What does it mean when when he says, I am who I am, a variety of interpretations. So in the first place, we're going to come back to the name later and that dynamic art. That's entailed in the name. But the fact that there are so many interpretations. Growing up, I often had the idea that when you read a text, any text in the Bible, there is only one right interpretation, one correct interpretation. And my task is to find that one correct meaning of the text. And if I don't find the correct meaning, then this text can't talk to me.
Or I'm going astray.
Or I'm going astray. But more and more, from own experience, from talking to other people, but reading about interpretations, it's about a relation between us and the text. A constant relationship, where this text, in different phases of my life, can say different things to me. And the one isn't right and the other one wrong. It comes in different voices to me. If I think of reading this text years ago, it had a different meaning for me than what it means now. And I know for sure in years to come I might return to this text.
No, it's almost in layers.
Yes.
There's richness. If you only look at one single side, then you're missing the volume of this.
Yes. And that is the beauty of the Bible, is it is this rich document with this long history, with people who knew how to tell stories and relate this so that it enhances conversation. And reading up on now commentaries and what other people are writing, coming under the realization that this is a Jewish text. We often forget that we are working with a Jewish text when we're busy here, and we can learn so much from how the Jews interpret this text of theirs. Obviously, we as Christians have a certain lens through which we look at it as well, but that doesn't take away that we need to be in conversations with the Jewish interpreters as well. And with the Jews, it's so interesting. For the Jews, a multitude of viewpoints on a text is part of worship. For them, it's worship.
Because it almost inspires conversation,
Yes.
relationships. I'm reading a book, Church of the Wild of Victoria Lewis, and she tells of the differences in languages where, for example, English is a very noun-based language where we would put a noun to something. So God would be the divine being, where the Jewish language is much more a relational language, verb-based language. So God would be being, not the being. It would be a constant dynamic flow of energy and relationship and conversation. So I think to not know that actually puts blinders on us in terms of reading the Bible. Because we come from it again from a very specific and static, that noun-based base.
Yes. And to a large degree, it has to be it has to do with power as well, because if we understand the noun, we have control as to what God can or cannot do, because we understand the noun. But if it's relational and if it is dynamic, then God can't be contained. God can't be pinpointed.
So if God says, I am who I am, God is saying, I am being, I am becoming, I am constantly, from all time until forever, I am being.
Yes. Yeah.
Not a being, I am becoming.
I am what happens.
I am what happens.
Yeah.
Yes, that's very beautiful.
I am what happens. I am what is taking place. I am what is opening up. It is this constant movement. And we learn that from being in conversation with interpreters and our Jewish background. So it's wonderful. I often feel very sad that we somehow got stuck in single interpretations. And tied into that, also that very dynamic nature, is that we often don't take our own interpretation seriously.
Yeah, we don't think that we are allowed an interpretation.
Because where it is tied into the nouns, do I know enough about this noun, and leaving aside this dynamic nature, I often feel inhibited because I don't know Hebrew. I don't know the background. But with God being what is, it's also God saying in our context. Moses is tending his flocks. He's doing his daily work. He gets up in the morning, he takes out the sheep, and he goes into the wilderness. That's his job. But where we are in our jobs, God is coming to us, and we have to listen to that and take our interpretations, our experiences, each one of us, take that seriously. So I can't tell you what you should believe, what you should take out of this text. What is it saying to you? I have to listen to you telling me what you've experienced from this text. And that's why these conversations are so important to us, because it's constantly this conversation. This is what we discover and what speaks to us from Exodus 3 this morning. But what does it say to you? It's just as valid. We're not the big experts telling you now this is the meaning. We're telling you that it is busy in a conversation with us, we're in a conversation, and we share in this conversation, and you have your own experiences, just as valid.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the bush, the burning bush, that was God's invitation to Moses to take notice, to see something that intrigued him, that made him curious, that made him go closer. So I think it can be anything.
Anything.
We don't need to wait for a burning bush. It can be anything that draws our attention, anything that makes us want to know more, or want to see more, or want to go closer. And then I think to hang in there a little bit, to see what's happening.
Yes.
That also invites God to into, or it gives you long enough to hear God talking to you.
To become aware of what is happening, which is God unfolding here.
Yeah.
Because the bush burning isn't actually a miracle.
Yeah.
A bush still, when there's a veld fire or whatever, bushes burn. So there's nothing strange regarding a bush burning. But Moses stood still long enough to see that it keeps burning. And that is the beauty of this passage. it's as if this dynamic God says, if you stand still long enough to see what is happening.
And in a sense, the extraordinary is constantly happening.
Yes.
It never burns out.
Yes.
It is constantly there. Even if Moses goes away from the burning bush, he can carry that with him, that the extraordinary presence, well, it's not extraordinary that God is present, but for us, the feeling, the knowledge that God is constantly so extraordinarily there is something wonderful to carry with us. Yeah.
And we tend to have such a lot of objections and prerequisites in terms of where we are to see God and what is miraculous and what is extraordinary. There's this old Jewish tale being told of when the sea was split for the Israelites and they moved through, there were these two Israelites entering into this path that opened up. And the moment they stepped into it, they said, but it's still so wet and it is so muddy and look at it's slimy. And they had all these objections and they said, it doesn't look much different from the slime pits we experienced in Egypt. And all the way through, they were complaining and objecting and so on. So they didn't see the miraculous in it, and they didn't see the people on the other shore busy singing and dancing. They were complaining.
In the middle of that.
In the middle, in the midst of what is unfolding. And often we are like that. We are standing amidst miracles, the extraordinary, the experience of God, and we complain. It's so easy, and we've spoken about that a few weeks ago. It's so easy to focus on the negative. But to open up to the extraordinary and this dynamic relationship, and to take yourself seriously, as seriously as God takes you. What's also interesting, I want to stay a little bit with that in my own meditation around it, writing in my journal, is somehow there's an interplay for me between Moses saying, "Who am I?" and God says, "I am." Who am I? And God says, "I am." There's somehow a coming together there of who am I? I am part who I am. It's a very delicate, and it reminds me of that beautiful story of St. Francis going into the cave at night, and the whole night he only had this one prayer: who are you and who am I? Who are you and who am I? And in this, it's also this almost Moses discovering who he is, God saying who, and this to and fro relationship.
Yeah, and I think in terms of noticing our burning bushes, it needn't be something we're talking about extraordinary. But sitting and looking at, I'm seeing there on the wire, on the fence, there's a glossy starling with the sun shining on its wings, and it's such an extraordinary color. It takes your breath away every time you see it, and there's something of the being of God in there.
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily need to be something that's so totally miraculous.
Yeah.
The burning bush can be anything, and the message can be a very simple experience of the wonder of being.
Yes. 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 Yeah. So the big challenge for all of us is to stand still long enough to notice and to listen and to become aware and to be part of this wonderful dynamic movement. It's such an adventure. It really is. Thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation once again. We enjoy it very much, and we enjoy the feedback that we receive. Keep it coming, and we would love to hear of some of your experiences.
Yeah, have a wonderful week, everybody.
Keep well.
Bye-bye.